If there's one tablet that has the staying power, it's none other than the iPad.
Hey guys, it's John B here with PhoneArena, and this is a review of the 6th generation iPad.
It follows its predecessor in familiar fashion with an irresistible price of $329 for consumers. What's largely different though is that Apple's really focusing on how the iPad can be used in education, as schools can purchase it for the discounted price of $299. But given the stagnant nature of the tablet market, can this new iPad somehow spark considerable interest once again? Signature designs are tough to get away from, especially when they're ingrained into the consciousness of consumers. Even though it doesn't surprise us that Apple doesn't change up the format with the design of its 6th generation iPad, you could say that the series could absolutely use some kind of change. In fact, the new iPad looks largely unchanged from the front, sporting nearly the same distinctive design cues since the 1st generation iPad. It's sporting the same aluminum body and beveled edges that has been with the series. Our particular model is the gold version, which is also available in silver and space gray. Interestingly though, depending on the angle and how light hits the aluminum body, the color can appear rose gold in tone. But unlike the 9.7-inch version of the iPad Pro, this one doesn't feature the smart connector. When you have such a recognizable design, it makes perfect sense to keep the same format, which is exactly what we get here with the new iPad. Not only that, but when you factor in the cost of this tablet, it's remarkable it's priced the way it is because you wouldn't expect something so premium with its construction. Now, one of the more important news about the new iPad is that it offers support for the Apple Pencil, which is something that's been exclusive to the iPad Pro line. There are obviously some practical applications for the Pencil, like jotting down notes, drawing a sketch, or signing a document, but unless you're in a profession that relies heavily on using it, the Apple Pencil is more of a companion that complements some of the iPad's core functions. We do appreciate how it expands the iPad's functionality because now you have all these apps that support it that you could leverage here with the new iPad. The only gripe that we have with it is that there's no real way to store the Pencil when it's not being used. The new iPad's display doesn't differ whatsoever in the specs when you compare it to its direct predecessor. In fact, the size and resolution of this Retina display remains identical to last year's model. So that is a 9.7-inch LED backlit IPS display with a resolution of 1536 by 2048 pixels. Is it the most magnificent screen we've seen in a tablet? Not really, but we're not expecting it to be that either because of its price point. At the very least, details suffice enough for reading, surfing the web, and watching videos. The color production, however, appears to favor a subtle, cooler tone, as white tends to exude a little bit of blue. Viewing angles can be a little bit finicky at wide angles, but it's not a distraction by any means, especially when all that matters to the user is what they see head on. For anyone that has used an iOS device of some kind, whether that's an older iPad or an iPhone, the interface is a familiar one that's dominated by the platform's signature grid-like layout. Getting around is fairly simple, a common characteristic of Apple's experience, but the biggest obstacle to overcome when it comes to getting acquainted with the new experience is knowing what gestures to use when navigating around. It didn't take us long to get acquainted with navigating around, trying to access things like the notifications, switching between apps using the 5-finger gestures, or even accessing the control center. What we really appreciate about Apple's tablet platform is that the apps have been optimized not only for a larger display size, but also support for landscape. Many Android tablets fail to deliver this fundamental function, so it's especially satisfying that Apple hits the bullseye in this particular area. And just like the iPad Pro tablets, you also have the side-by-side split view between two apps. So when you combine its straightforward navigation and optimized layouts, there's no denying that the experience here with the new iPad is one of the richest and most satisfying around. But then again, no one else comes close to Apple when it relates to the tablet optimized experiences. Under the hood, the new iPad is rocking the upgraded quad-core Apple A10 Fusion chipset, the same thing that powers the iPhone 7 line. And as expected, it's remarkably fast and responsive, which is what you expect from an iPad in general. Then again, the iPad's performance has consistently been smooth, even stemming back since the first iPad. Everyday things like scrolling through the web browser, checking out posts on Facebook, they're all accompanied with buttery responses that has been a staple with the iPad's performance. In some rare instances though, we do notice some stutter with random things. But then again, it can be just software related at this point, but it's still worth pointing out. Benchmark tests indicates that this new iPad is just as formidable with its processing power against the iPad Pro 9.7-inch, which leverages the A10X Fusion chipset. That's particularly impressive for this affordable iPad, and gaming isn't a problem either with this one, evident in how it's able to maintain smooth frame rates in various games we've tested. As far as options that go with the iPad, it's available in 32 or 128GB capacities. The difference between them is only $100, but we really wish that it started at 64GB. And if you really need it, there is also a cellular-enabled version of the new iPad, but the difference in price is $130 from the base Wi-Fi one. And that's just a little bit steep in our opinion. I'm not sure if you're the type to take photos with your tablet, but I guess if it's the last resort and the only thing available to you, then you could try and use the one that's in the new iPad. But as we take a look at it, the specs are very similar to last year's model. So that's an 8-megapixel backside illuminated sensor with an f2.4 aperture lens. And on the front, we have a 1.2-megapixel camera. Apple has done very little in the way of updating the camera app with its iPads. By default, it's one of the simplest camera interfaces around, offering access to the bare essentials such as taking photos, videos, square shots, slow motion, panoramics, and time-lapse. Predictably so, the camera's performance is mediocre at best when combining its quality under all sorts of conditions. When there's ample lighting in the composition, such as being outdoors on a sunny day, or indoors with plenty of artificial lighting around, the camera is able to snap up decent-looking shots that can rival most smartphones. But no, it's not going to beat the iPhone, but for a tablet, it suffices. As with most devices, the quality dips when lighting in a scene becomes scarce, often resulting in grainy-looking images that appear more like they're water paintings than anything else. You'll want to refrain from using the iPad under these harsh conditions, especially when there's no flash to compensate for the dimly lit conditions. And it's worth pointing out too that the new iPad also struggles with dynamic range, as brightly lit areas in certain scenes tend to be overexposed to the point that details can't be recovered. Topping out at 1080p resolution at 30 frames per second, the new iPad requires a bit more care when recording video footage. For starters, it lacks any sort of stabilization. Beyond that, the iPad's video recording performance is very similar to its still shot performance. That means it's effective enough when there's decent lighting around, while failing to produce anything tangible when there's not a lot. In particular, there's just too much noise with its quality under low light, making the overall look of the video somewhat softer tone. And it doesn't help too that the audio recording quality makes it sound as though we're distant. Videos play with no problem at all, but the only distracting thing about the experience is the 3:2 aspect ratio of the display. When watching videos in full screen mode, the screen aspect ratio results in the addition of those black bars on the top and bottom of the video. It might be an oversight for some users, but if you're used to watching videos that take up the entirety of the screen, this might prove to be a little bit distracting. However, we gotta say we're pleasantly impressed by the rich audio quality it's able to produce with its speakers, and that's despite not being graced with the quad speaker layout of the iPad Pro line. The audio performance out of the new iPad is accompanied with solid tones that reverberate at louder volumes. We can definitely feel the sense of substance whenever music is played. While Apple hasn't officially stated the battery capacity in its new iPad, it's more than likely the same as before. Don't worry about that, just because it delivers outstanding battery life from a full charge. Using it as a complementary device in our real-world testing, we're really impressed by nearly the 3 days of juice we're able to get out of it. But if there's one gripe we have about the new iPad and its battery, it has to be the obnoxiously long recharge time. Using the included charger, it took over 6.5 hours for it to reach 100% capacity from 1%, and that's just downright terrible, given how if you're in a pinch for time, you won't see any meaningful levels attempting to charge it for a short period of time. In an age of fast charging, it's shocking that the new iPad crawls at a snail's pace. The new iPad is arguably one of Apple's least upgraded successive products in recent memory. Unlike the iPhone line that generally sees several additions while retaining the same design as its predecessor, Apple recycles the design to the teeth while offering only 2 major changes. And that's the support for the Apple Pencil and adding in the new A10 Fusion processor. Now, despite this minuscule upgrade, this is still the best all-around tablet you can get for your money. That's seriously saying a lot, especially given how this particular model isn't the highest offering in Apple's stable. Part of that reasoning is because of its price, and at only $329 for consumers and $299 for schools, there's nothing close to matching its performance, value, and healthy ecosystem. You could buy a Windows tablet, but that's going to cost you a lot more, or you could go really cheap and get a Chromebook or one of those Amazon tablets, but then again, they're not going to deliver the same rich experience that you're going to get here in the iPad, so it really helps that the new iPad is priced affordably. And that, folks, is what makes this new iPad so attractive. Yes, you'll need to fork over an additional $100 for the Apple Pencil, but even without that, the new iPad is uncontested in its price range. We can't stress enough about the new iPad's valuable package, and despite its minuscule upgrade, it's still by by far the best bang for the buck you'll spend on a tablet.
And that is it for our review, guys. Hope you like it. Let me know what you think about it. And if you want to learn more about the new iPad, you can check out our website, PhoneArena.com. This is John V, signing off.